misuse, and abuse, and that's why I kind of broke it down into those 4 categories. Does that, all those make sense and how they're distinguished? And they all happen, you know. So I wanted to just briefly go through some of the different medications and how they're scheduled. So the Drug Enforcement Administration schedules drugs based on their potency and their addictive quality, I guess. And so they're scheduled like a 1 through 5. So your 1 is the highest abuse potential, and that's where you have like heroin, LSD, bath salts, marijuana. I mean, marijuana is still illegal, you know, at the federal level. So high potential for abuse, no accepted medical use, according to the, you know, DEA, federal government at this point in time. So then you have your Schedule 2, which also have a high abuse potential. And that's where you find like your hydromorphone, your oxycodone, so your OxyContin, your Percocet, all fall into that. Fentanyl, Adderall, Ritalin, your stimulants. So those are level 2, which have a high abuse potential. So we need to be educating around that. There are concerns around these medications. Again, high potential for abuse, but there are accepted medical use with some restrictions. So level 3, or the Schedule 3, are mediums. Medium abuse potential, that's where you get your Vicodin, your Tylenol with codeine, Suboxone, Subutex. So those are the medications that are used to help somebody who is opioid dependent get off of the opioids. That's your Suboxone and your Subutex, 2 different types. One has naloxone and then one doesn't. So the potential for abuse is less than your 1 and 2s. May lead to moderate or low physical dependence, accepted medical use. And then it just kind of goes down from there. Schedule 4, if you're low, that's your Xanax, Klonopin, Valium. Low potential for abuse, you know, but still some. And then your 5s are your lowest, like your over-the-counter prescriptions with codeine.
Well, I think it seems curious, you took somebody taking a level 4, and they sent them to a level 3, so they're doing this cocktail.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of people don't understand that either. You get somebody who's on a, you know, oxycodone, so Percocet or your OxyContin, or who's on a benzodiazepine, so like your Valium. Those are respiratory depressants. So if somebody is also having some alcohol with that, a drink, alcohol is also a respiratory depressant. So combining those 2 together, I think sometimes it's just people don't understand that can be a dangerous combination. And you know, if their prescriber hasn't said anything, or the pharmacist, they might not ever know. And driving also too, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But,
That's my biggest confusion as an EAP, is that regardless of what they're taking, they come in and then they go, and we drink, you know, we have alcohol at night, and I'm like, whoa, I mean, any of these things, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know which has the most potential to kill them. So.
Well, and it's going to vary for everybody's body is different,
Yes.
and everybody handles things differently.
And they lie.
Well,
No, you never have a patient lie to you.
Well, and that's why we're trying to do a lot more education with the prescribers and the pharmacists to really start pushing, not that they don't do education, but to really start pushing, especially to the mixing of medications and how dangerous that can be. And you know, even though they're legal prescriptions, that people need to be careful with it. I saw another hand.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What are the bath salts? What are we talking
Oh,
about?
so bath salts are, when you heard about like that whole big zombie case in Florida, did you remember?
The zombies attacked everybody.
No, it's a type of cannabinoid, I guess, that is used. It's like, have you heard of like synthetic marijuana? That's another type of it. So there's synthetic marijuana, and then there's bath salt spice. So it's just a type of K2. It's plant material, like the synthetic marijuana, which I hate that term because it's not anywhere close to marijuana, but it's like a plant, just any kind of plant-based material that then is sprayed with a chemical that's supposed to mimic THC. Now that's a synthetic marijuana, and that's in the same category as bath salts. It's just there are these these chemical compounds that people are taking that have never been tested on humans. And so individuals are ingesting these and having some severe kidney issues and lots of different things. They're illegal to sell, the different compounds, but there's like hundreds and hundreds of compounds in bath salts and in the synthetic marijuana. And so the individuals who are creating it keep bypassing the law by changing the chemical compound. So somebody may buy what's called spice in a store or like in a gas station, which they're not supposed to. And it might have certain chemical compounds in it, and then they buy it the next day. It could be a totally different product, even though it's marketed the same. And so the DEA tries to stay on top of it by outlawing, the certain chemical compounds, but they keep changing them. So it's just another thing that individuals are using to get high. So bath salts and then the synthetic marijuana are the two different, what they're called. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify the distinction with the bath salts versus, say, K2 and the spice. The bath salts are more similar to like an amphetamine, cocaine type
Yes,
drug versus
right.
a cannabinoid.
Yeah, right. Yes, you're right. The cannabinoid is the synthetic marijuana piece.
Yes,
Right.
I just wanted to clarify that those
No,
are
that's good.
very different.
Yeah.
So when people are talking about what they're using,
Yeah. No, thank you for doing that. That's very good.
I guess I would just, if you were going to insert alcohol in here, you would put it as Schedule 1. And I mean, I really hate the split that we have in this culture between alcohol and everything else.
Yeah.
Because alcohol needs to be Schedule 1. And
Yeah, well, alcohol is definitely underplayed because again, it's legal.
legal, right.
And but we know when we look at data, what's the number one cause of a lot of issues, and yeah, it's alcohol. It's very true. Yeah.
But it couldn't go there because it is used for medical.
Well, it can't go under Schedule 1.
Yeah, 'cause
maybe
it's,
2, but I mean, I don't know what you use.
Yeah, they don't list it as a drug,
Oh,
just
that's-
because that's not how it's classified by the DEA, so,
Now tobacco would be Schedule 1.
yeah,
There you go.
yeah, right. So I saw him in the back.
So we don't see a lot of this in our treatment center, but the bath salt people we have had, they'll present really psychotic on the front end. So in the ER, they don't always know, is this a mental illness or
Right.
is this some kind of chemical that was overdone? So they'll initially come and we'll screen, and then all of a sudden we see all this psychotic type
Right.
activity. Send them to the ER, and then they're like, well, they need psych, but in reality, they need stabilizing until we can deal with the drug part.
Right. And are you seeing as much of the bath salts? Because I've kind of heard that some of that is not as prevalent as it used to be.
We haven't seen it much.
Yeah.
either.
Yeah, it was kind of a craze, I would say, more last year. Well, though we did have an episode with the synthetic THC, a pretty bad episode in Denver last year, where there was an incident, the health department got involved and all that. But I think some of that has been decreasing. One of the other issues that we're starting to see, we've seen it nationally around the prescription drug piece is heroin increases. So a lot of the states that have really implemented, like the Appalachia area, southeast part of the country, has implemented a lot of strict policies, done a lot around the issue of prescription drug abuse, and they've seen those numbers drop, but their heroin rates have doubled now. And so, I think there's a tendency for individuals, because they may start on opiates, but opioids are expensive. And, they have now maybe developed a substance or an opioid use disorder and need to have, the medication, and so need to have the opioid, and so now have switched to heroin. And we are seeing our heroin indicators here in our state rise as well. So, we need to keep that in mind too. And that's where, we need to kind of like follow through. Again, and I talked about this middle of the line approach. Are you guys familiar with the prescription drug monitoring program? Have you heard of the PDMP? The PDMP is basically if you go to fill a prescription for a Schedule 2 through 5 substance, so any of those substances, the pharmacy is required by law to enter into this system, your name, the medication, and the prescriber who filled in your dose. And the purpose of it is for anybody who has a DEA number to prescribe a controlled substance. So your doctors, your dentists, or your nurses with prescriptive authority can check the system to ensure that doctor shopping isn't happening or pharmacy shopping, so that somebody isn't going from doctor to doctor to doctor, pharmacy to pharmacy to pharmacy. And so the idea is that, they can check this system and ensure that isn't happening. And I totally forgot my point that I was going to do with that. So that's what happens, I just keep going off. I get very excited about this topic, and now I forgot my original comment. But the PVMP is relevant in that, those individuals that have authority can check the system for the different controlled substances. So my thought may come back to me, and then I'll spout it out. Yeah.
If you were looking at drugs used in the workplace or by working people, I think that chart would almost be flipped over. And the prescription drugs with codeine and the benzodiazepines would be toward the top as far as usage goes.
Well, as far as usage, yeah. This is kind of going from the schedule of abuse potential down. But yeah, and I'm sure you're probably right with that. But just so you kind of know, I like to point this out just so that we understand, how they're classified and that there is high abuse potential with some of these medications. So what we see most abused are depressants, so Xanax and Valium, stimulants, opioids. These are also called your benzodiazepines, if you ever hear that term, are more of your Xanax and your Valium. And we're starting to see more issues with some of those medications as well. And again, mixing like a depressant with an opioid, they're both respiratory depressants, can be very dangerous. So why, is this even an issue? Well, because of access. When we look at national data, about 70% of individuals say that they are getting medications, so non-prescribed medications from a medicine cabinet. So they're not buying it off the internet, they're not buying it from a dealer on the street. They're going, into a medicine cabinet at home, they're going into a friend's medicine cabinet, they're going into a grandparent medicine cabinet. Nobody locks their medication, so it's just easy to get. And again, there's that idea of them being safe. So just to throw out some statistics for you, is poisoning is actually now the leading cause of death from injury in the United States. And about 9 out of 10 of those are due to drugs. So we've now surpassed motor vehicle fatalities. So do we need to be talking about the issue of substance use and abuse in our workplaces? Yeah. You've seen, I'm sure, a lot of statistics about how it affects our communities, how it affects everybody. It's a big deal, so we need to be doing it. We need to be enacting good policy. We need to be talking to people. We need to offer EAP. We need to be asking the questions. This is just an interesting graph, I think, because they asked youth age 12 to 17 how long it would take them to get these substances. And if you look at the prescription drug piece, 34% of youth said they could get a prescription within a day or less. Again, they're getting them from medicine cabinets. Easy to get. And I kind of showed this already, that if you combine the 54% who obtained it free from a friend or a relative, and your 16% that bought or took it, 70% are getting it from medicine cabinets. It's just the point of that slide. And then this is looking at overdose death rates for the nation. Again, this is national data. But if you look at the column on the left, am I too loud? I get really excited about this, sorry. I really don't, I probably don't even need this. Sorry. All of a sudden I realized, I'm like, God, I'm talking. Can you want to turn the volume down? I just got more people in the hallway too, and I'm like, God, I'm a loud phone talker. I gotta be shutting my door. Okay, sorry guys. So this column on the left is, again, this is national data. So 80% of patients who are, and this is specifically for painkillers, opioids, are on a low dose, which is less than 100 milligrams of morphine per day, and are only seeing one doctor. Here you've got about 10% that see one doctor but are on a high dose, and about 10% that are seeing multiple doctors, usually involved in drug diversion. That's just kind of the estimates that they've given. But I think what's interesting is to look at this column here. This is the people that have overdosed, so died in our country. That if you combine these two columns here, this 40% and 40%, the underlying or the common denominator is that these individuals were on a high dose of an opioid. So whether they were only seeing one doctor or whether they were, involved with doctor shopping, 40% and 40%, so 80% of these individuals were on a high dose of an opioid. So being on a high dose puts individuals at a higher risk, and so that's why they really need to have more monitoring, because that can be really dangerous. And to look at some of the Colorado data, I'm going to skip that one. In 2012, more than twice as many people in Colorado died from poisoning due to opioids, so painkillers, about 295, then from drunk driving related crashes. We had about 133 of those. Drunk, we've done a lot of education around drinking and driving. There's been a lot of dollars put into it. We've had a lot of prevention messaging. There's been a lot of policy. It's more common now to hear, don't let your friend drive drunk. Like some of those, that's just a little bit more common. This issue is a little bit new, kind of, it's really kind of blown up in the last 10 years. And, but you can see just from our numbers that we need to start talking about it a little bit more and start addressing it, because people are dying in our state from being on prescription opioids. And if we look at deaths, I just kind of outlined here, 45 to 54 is where we see the most deaths. We don't know why exactly it's in that age range. It's pretty consistent with national data that it's in that age range if individuals are just on things longer or what, but this is coming from coroners in the state. We're looking at our death data.
But the three highest categories are all working age adults, if you look at it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not necessarily teenagers like we might intuit.
Right, exactly. And actually, in our state, in the 2010-2011 data, we were second highest in the country for our abuse rates of prescriptions. So individuals that said they didn't have a prescription but they were using somebody's, or they obtained it illegally. Second highest. So now I like to be second highest in a lot of things, but I would prefer we're not second highest in that.
Who's number one?
Oregon.
Oregon.
Yeah. We've now, the newer data came out, the 11 and 12, and we've dropped a little bit. I think we're 14th now. But we were at 6%, we're now at like 5.1%. Still not very good. And when we look at gender, really, this issue does not discriminate. It affects all races, it affects both genders. This has actually changed. Females in 2011 were a lot lower, their numbers, and now you can see they're pretty equal between males and females dying from this in our state. About 36% of the drug poisoning deaths in Colorado actually involved opioids. Pretty high percent when you think about all the deaths that happen. 36% of them, the coroner is attributing to opioids. About 21% of the hospitalizations were due to opioid poisoning. And then I just kind of highlight this. I know this is a little bit hard to see down here, but I highlight the 12th grade. This is the youth risk behavior survey that's done every 2 years, so it's actually is being done or has been done in the schools this year, so we'll be getting some updated data. But we're higher for our 12th grade, rate higher than the national average. We're 29.2, 12th graders nationally are about 25.6. And that's for individuals who say that they used a prescription that wasn't theirs. Basically, they used it to get high, or it could be self-medicate, whatever, but they didn't have a prescription and they were using it, someone else's. So I'm going to kind of breeze through some of this stuff, but I wanted to just break down some of the different medications and talk a little bit about the mixing, because you guys brought that up as well. So when I'm talking about depressants, central nervous system depressants are all sedatives and tranquilizers, but where we see the biggest issues and what I'm talking about most about with this issue are the benzodiazepines. So your Xanax, your Valium, used to treat anxiety, used to treat sleep disorders, the Halcion. They inhibit brain activity, which produces a drowsy or calming effect, which is why they were good for those things. Some of the short-term effects, the slowed pulse and breathing, again, that respiratory depressant that I was talking about, slurred speech, drowsiness, lowered blood pressure, poor concentration, fatigue, confusion, impaired coordination, potentially. And then some of the longer-term effects, again, that respiratory depression and arrest. These are, again, obviously extreme effects that can happen to